Welcome to the Coptimizer Podcast, a platform dedicated to uncuffing your true potential in public safety. We're here to provide you with valuable tips and insights that will help you optimize your life and career. I'm retired Chief Patrick Flannelly, and I'm honored to be your guide and coach on this journey. Here, I'll share the latest insights and strategies to help you survive and thrive in the demanding world of public safety. Our noble duty is to protect and serve. We embody the role of peacemakers in our communities. However, this profession's immense physical and mental demands come with a price. If we fail to take a proactive approach for our well-being and lead ourselves first, then the stress from the job can and will lead to poor health outcomes. We have all seen it play out. Not only does this impact our professional and personal lives, but it also affects our ability to fulfill this sacred duty. Like many of you, my journey has been filled with tremendous challenges, with highs and lows. However, through creativity, experience, and a positive attitude, I successfully managed over 30 years in law enforcement, emerging healthy and happy. Now, I am driven to share what I've learned to show you that the path is not all doom and gloom. There is hope and a profound purpose in serving your community, and I'm here to show you that it does not have to come at the cost of your health and well-being. Join us as we explore cutting-edge research, interview top experts, and share inspiring stories of transformation. Whether on duty or off, it's time to optimize your potential and live your best life. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. This is the Coptimizer Podcast. Greetings all. Welcome back to another episode of the Coptimizer Podcast. And as usual, we've got another awesome guest. We're going international today, heading over to the Netherlands. And I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Erik Hein is our guest today. We connected on LinkedIn via a few different mutual connections that we have, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. Erik, welcome to the Coptimizer Podcast.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy your show.
Well, thanks. Thanks for at least saying it, whether it's true or not.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, I have a tendency to be a chatter and a rambler, but
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
I really enjoy this process, and I'm so, I'm grateful for your time and, the fact that you're willing to spend some time with us here and educate us in the U.S. about what's happening in the Netherlands. And we're going to talk today primarily, I think, about training, but we'll veer off and talk about a lot of different things. But before we jump into that, can you give us just a little bit of background on what you're doing these days, what led up to that, and then we'll jump right in.
Yes, of course. So when I was a youngster, I was also at the police, but then on the other side.
That's the classic story.
Is it a classic story? Yeah.
Yeah.
When the police came, it was always bad news. But yeah. Sorry.
I ran a lot from the police in my younger days. I'm not gonna
You
lie.
also.
Generally,
Yeah.
nothing serious, just kids being kids. But I never got
Yeah.
caught.
Oh, great.
That was my knock on wood.
Yeah. But I was caught, and it was good also because I grew up on the streets when I was a youngster. My father died. My father died when I was 6, and he had lung cancer. It was very strange because my mother one day I woke up and I asked, "Where is Daddy?" And she told me he's on the toilet. And then after an hour I asked, Where's Daddy? He's on the toilet. And I was playing again and again, and then it suddenly surprised me. Why is he that long on the toilet? And then he was in the hospital and died of lung cancer. And my mother was she had psychiatric problems, so
Oh yeah.
she could not give me the structure. I love her, by the way, and she's still alive. And yeah, I mean, she's the best mother there is, but she couldn't handle that young boy. So I was living on the streets, and there, you know, at that age, there was a lot of drugs and violence and what we call what you call gangs in the United States. It was not that heavy, but it was heavy. And and since that time, that sparkled my interest for how to be. I think in the first place, how to be tough and how to become resilient, even at a young age. I wrote a book. It's called in English. It's called Martial Arts as a Compass, and there I describe that even at that age, at 11 or 12, I was with some friends, and I was stabbed in my leg with a knife, and I was walking home to my mother. And then I suddenly saw the blood behind me because I didn't know I was stabbed, and I saw the blood behind me, and it was, of course, it was very, I was very fearful, but I also had a little voice, and I talked about it with Jeff Quayle, actually, from Setcan,
Yeah.
and there was a little voice in my head like, this is not a good life. I can do better. Like a little voice in my head, it has to end, and that voice, and some youngsters were the same gang didn't have that voice, and they just went on and became addicted, and most of them are dead now. And so that had always interested me. How do you find that voice, and can you listen to it, and how to become resilient and toughen up? And martial arts was for me the the path, so to speak. So that's my introduction, and
Yeah.
then at 8, so I didn't have any schooling. So when I was 16, I started all over again with going to school and so on. And I was 20, I think, when I had the opportunity to go to university. And I did it just because it kind of make my daddy proud. So I'm not a lost child anymore. I can be, like I have some competence. And then I started to study human movement sciences. I had no clue what it was. But I just wanted to go to university and to show yeah to show my daddy and my family that I was not a lost boy. So that's the background, and as you know, backgrounds keep following you, eh?
Absolutely. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, and what you're describing, the way that that would be explained in the US today, or how it would be even categorized, is what they call an ACE,
yeah,
adverse childhood experience. And how do those childhood experiences impact development? You know, that because
yeah,
that's obviously that's clearly significant trauma from a very young age,
yeah,
and then just from the passing of your father, and then really just even then having to try to manage the living with your single parent mother now, who's also trying to not only deal with the loss of a husband, but now also how do you raise a child.
yeah,
And yeah, if you don't, I mean, without the right resources and just the wrong catalyst, right, you can go down a path that can be very difficult to recover from. And that's, it's, I think it's fascinating. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. And the idea of resilience is something that I don't think a word like that sometimes just gets tossed around like, oh, I had a tough day, but I'm resilient, and tomorrow
hmm,
tomorrow will be a better day. But, sometimes people don't know what real trauma is and like what real adversity is. And so the 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 I think the benefit to what you've experienced is I mean, you understand truly like how like the depths and the power of the human spirit. And really it's almost in like you could explain it even like in terms of Nietzsche or even Viktor
Mm,
Frankl, right? Like, if your why is strong enough, you can, tolerate and
absolutely.
anyhow, right? You're going to do whatever it takes. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and
so
I
that
and I and I'm of course now it's later, but now a few years ago, because lately in my life I studied also psychology, and I became at university, and I became very interested in psychoanalysis, and especially in Jung. And there is a great Jungian psychiatrist who was also at Huberman's Lab podcast, James Hollis, and
oh yeah.
he can speak so much about that part of you, what he calls the soul, and that in the first part of life you try to build identity and so on, and but then in the later part of life, and I'm 54 now, then something is, like ticking in your head, like, are you still listening to me? And that voice, and you can call it, because I'm also a man of faith, but you can call it whatever you want, but that voice inside your head, that soul part, that for me means resilience now. That listen to the needs of your soul, and yeah, and
Yeah,
that
and
that
and
yeah,
and addressing your spirit, right? That's
addressing your spirit. And the lifelong process of that's fascinating, because even today, for example, in my relationship with my wife, I sometimes get triggered by old wounds, and I know I the strange thing is I know that I'm triggered. I know that my let's call it wounded child is reacting to her,
yes.
but still I'm not always able to to
To
be
reel it in.
to reel it in and to be an adult, and that's so fascinating. And so then the question becomes, who am I? And like, am I just a coping mechanism from years before? I've been treating myself, but that's the lifelong process. I think that's resilience in its core, maybe.
Yeah, well, you just answered it because I was going to ask you because everybody has, I mean, there's a standard definition of resilience, but I was curious what you like just from your own experiences, how would you describe to somebody else
Mm,
what in your mind and your heart what
wow,
resilience means and where it's taken you today?
that's such a great question, and I think I can only speak from my experience, and of course you can use all kinds of scientific theories, but if I just make it very personal, I think that it depends on the stage of life you're in. So, for example, when I was a youngster and coming off the streets, resilience for me meant structure and meaning, and I found in the martial arts. There was a clear path, there was structure, there was discipline, there was etiquette, all those things, and there were clear goals, and we developed ourselves mentally and physically. So that's a kind of resilience, where you are doing things and making yourself strength. It's a little bit about doing. But now, 40 years later, for me, resilience has become totally the other way around. It means, for me, resilience, I cannot find the English word, but it's about,
Use the Dutch word. I want to hear it. I think that would be cool.
oh, overgave.
Overgave.
Overgave. To give yourself, so Christians would say, to give yourself to God, and give all your problems to God, but you can also use other words, but to let higher powers or your spirit take care of yourself, take care of you. It's not about pushing, forcing, which is great, by the way. But now it's more about, for me, about trusting my soul, and more letting things come to me, and through me. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit fake, but
No, I
fake.
think and that's where, wisdom, right, comes from and experience. Like when you're young, a lot of these things you don't even understand it, but and so you have a tendency to resist it. But I think as you get older and as you're perspective changes and you mature, then some of these, at least for me, some of these concepts become more tangible,
Yeah.
less esoteric, and so that's really cool. Because so yeah, I want to go back to that story. Like you put the air quotes around friends, right? So you're hanging out with a tough crowd because
Yeah.
that's your crew, right? That's
That's your crew. Yeah.
everybody needs a sense of belonging. We are,
Yeah.
again, like Nietzsche said, right? We're herd animals, and we have to be. We really struggle when we're not part of something, and a lot of times our identity is formed by those around us, which, hence the old saying, be cautious about the five people who you spend the most time with,
Yeah. Great.
because that's ultimately where you're gonna, that's the trajectory that you're gonna be on. But this, I'm curious because I mentioned the word spirit, and sometimes I do think I'm a person of faith as well. I was raised Catholic, and sometimes the spirit, it's brought to you and it works through you. And so
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm just really curious about that, like that moment you get into a a kerfuffle on the street and you get stabbed in the leg and you don't even realize it. And then when the realization hits, when you see blood and you literally see your
Yeah.
lifeblood pouring out of you,
Yeah.
now
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
is like it had, I think that has, if you want to, like, I know we talked a little bit on our pre-podcast a little bit about like Stephen Kotler
Yeah.
and Csikszentmihalyi and flow, but that, like, fear in a moment like that can actually generate a flow state, like it everything else, anything that's not a priority tends to wash away in that moment, and you focus solely on the thing that matters the most. um so I'm curious, if in that moment it's where you actually have that realization, like, this is not the path, there is a better path, and from that becomes hope, right?
Yeah.
There's something to work towards, there's something to live for, and now you can start building goals around that. I mean, I'm not a
Yeah.
psychologist.
Yeah.
I've just seen so much of it. When you're a cop for 30 years, you see a lot of trauma and a lot of misery, and
Yeah.
you know, you see success stories, but you also see a lot of tragedy, where people
Absolutely.
never do. And so that's always fascinating to me. Why do some people push through and make it without any support at all? They just always find a way. And I'm going to come. I want to say one final thing on that, and then I'll be quiet for a minute, because it's sometimes I think some even readings come to you at the right time. And
Yeah.
I'm reading Steve Magnus's new book right now, Win the Inside Game. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Oh
Um,
no, I've do hard things I have read. But
yeah,
his new book, okay.
yeah. So just recently released, but
Hmm.
in it he tells the story early in the book about a psychologist in the Kurt Rogers, maybe in the 50s, did an experiment on rats. Now, for anyone that's, he does make the caveat in the book, right? Like, maybe not a humane treatment for those that are
Hmm.
concerned about, the welfare of animals. This was a long time ago, but he he took a group of rats and put them in a pool that they couldn't escape from, because he wanted to see, how they would respond. And within 15 minutes, the rats, they treaded water and swam, and after 15 minutes, they drowned. They realized there's, you know, there was no way out, and so they drowned. So he then takes another group, puts them in the same environment, and then waits and just until that threshold where they're about to give up. And then he takes them out of the pool, dries them off, gives them something to eat, and then puts them right back in. So the question is how long do you think they were able to tread water the second time?
Oh, oh, this is a difficult question. Because it's a little bit. Have they learned that everything they do is not working? Then I don't think. I don't, I'm not. I don't know this experiment, but I think.
I didn't know it either. I'd never heard of this, and so
No,
this is fascinating. I couldn't wait to tell my kids this when I was after I had read it.
yeah, because Martin Seligman studied learned helplessness. So I can imagine that they learned that they were helpless, but they were not helpless because they were saved. So I can, if you ask me, if this was an examination, I would say A and B are both good.
Yeah. So what he found, and I read this. It was actually, yeah. So actually, it might have. It was in actually. This was in Arate in Brian Johnson's book. Um, I'm actually confusing two different books that I just that I read. So it was 60 hours is the
Ah,
answer. They went from drowning in within 15 minutes to being able to survive for 60 hours. So yeah, it was all about really it's about learned helplessness, but then the bigger story is about hope.
yeah,
And once you believe that you're going to be saved, you can hang on. Like
yeah,
like there is a power within you that will keep you going. And I think it speaks to a lot of things really about the power of the mind and
yeah,
the path that it can take you on for, good or bad. Like if you don't,
absolutely.
and so again, and this is something that I think is such a powerful lesson for first responders and police officers in general, because you on a daily basis, you're just exposed to trauma all day long. And if you don't have outside influences, or if you don't have mechanisms in play like self-care, really leading yourself first, you could, it's very easy to take on that mindset, that negativity, and try to carry
Uh,
it yourself and get to a point where, hey, you realize maybe there is no hope. And I think once officers lose hope, then that they become the toxic officer, and yeah, they're in big trouble at that point. And that's why, suicide is such a big problem in first responders right now. So like there's just the timing is I don't believe in coincidence so much anymore. I think there's a reason why things, are brought to you or why you seek them out. But anyway,
yeah,
I just
but also like reading it for the second time and then understanding it because sometimes now I reread some books from my youth and I think they are great, but like 20 years ago I didn't see it.
yeah, you have to be ready for it, right?
You have to ready, and the master appears, I think, is from China, also
Yeah.
Confucius. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But also, it reminds me that I think 10 years ago, no longer, we in the Netherlands, we have a program, mental skill training for the police. So every police officer and also the not executive personnel have gone through a 2 or 3 days program called Mental Skills. It's a broad program. It's not only about acute performance, but also about nutrition, lifestyle, and so on. But before that program was actually developed or implemented, I wrote an article for the police magazine, and the title was Spiritual Resilience. And at that time, I got a little bit, how do you call it? People were very critical about it because like
Yeah,
it's spiritual. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, yeah,
feedback or yeah,
yeah,
negative
feedback.
feedback.
But my whole point was at the time, I felt that if you have a job and you have all those things on your how do you call it?
Your duty belt,
Your
your
duty belt, like guns, tasers. No, did have tasers, but and you have your protective vest and you go on to the streets. That's a strange job. Like maybe you have to shoot somebody, or maybe somebody shoots you. And my whole intuition was that yes, mental skills important, physical, technical, strategical, and so on. But what about the spiritual side? Like asking the question, what am I doing here? What is the calling? And yeah, that part. And I think that's the most, maybe because if you grow older, but I think that part seems to me a very important part
very
to keep to
that,
keep your soul intact, especially in the circumstances right now, because I'm not longer with the police. I'm now more with, I do some projects for the military and for acute medicine. But for police officers in the Netherlands, at least, especially from COVID at that time, it's very like difficult because the political opinions, the societal opinions, then you have the police organization with all kinds of values, then you have your personal values. So, then you have to sometimes enforce violence and arrest and control people, but maybe you don't believe in the in the case yourself also, and you get a lot of public feedback like it it's difficult, I think, if you don't have a strong spiritual or philosophical identity. At the same time, and at the same time, sometimes people are 20 years or 22 years old. I mean, it's
Yes,
a hell of a job.
it is. And I don't want to get off track here because I like this conversation. I think is fascinating. And I this is the second time in a week, even just in the last few days, and I'm excited to talk to somebody. I don't want to mention his name because I didn't ask, but I'm going to ask him in the future if I can mention his name on the podcast. But he asked that question, like, how are you feeding your soul? Like, like we train as police officers. We do all the tactical training and everything else. Maybe we do physical fitness. Maybe we do jujitsu, firearms, driving, and we do all of those things. But then what are we doing on a regular basis to feed our soul? And that, like, I had never heard that expression before. Now I'm hearing it for a second time. So I'm taking this as a message for me. This is probably something I need to pay attention to. Um,
But the great thing about Eastern martial arts, by the way, sorry to if I interrupt you, you have to say
no,
that.
yeah,
Okay. That's the interesting thing about Eastern martial arts is that they have always thought this spiritual side alongside physical training. So the karate styles I did, like Kyokushinkai karate, Oyama had a whole dojo ode. We will train our bodies, minds, and spirit for a firm, unshaking spirit. There was a whole list of sayings about not only becoming strong yourself, but becoming strong in service of others. And you had all the other great karate masters, Funagoshi, and so on. Even the more modern styles, Heliocracy and Hicksomcracy from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, have a very uh, spiritual side. Even the Thais and traditional Thai boxing. So the Eastern martial arts, I think what they meant, especially Japanese, was that as our skills grow, so also our souls have to grow and our ethics. Because otherwise, you can become very strong, but are you strong for the good reasons? And yeah, how is your soul? So yeah, but
yeah, it's the
I didn't want to listen to it when I was a youngster. I just wanted to kick
you
people in the
you
legs,
just want to
but
be strong
I still
and
want to be
you want to be
strong. Yeah,
powerful. And
yeah,
that's the danger of power, right? If you don't have the proper respect for it, it can do a lot of damage.
yeah.
That's interesting. So before I even forget the so you're on this path where you have this moment of clarity that I have to take I have to go in a new direction. You have the discipline to be able to pursue that.
Yeah.
You go back to school. So, the message there is like you're never too old to learn. It's never too late. Um, you can always learn new things. As long as you're alive, there's always an opportunity. So you go down this path, you go to school, you go to university, you're studying exercise physiology. So your path to teaching where you are now, uh, was it the military and then the police side? Because I think you did a little bit of both. I was just kind of curious, just for background for, for the listeners, like,
Yeah.
kind of like what was your career trajectory and where has that led you?
So I was doing two things. I was heavily involved in martial arts at that time in karate, and then when kickboxing became popular here in kickboxing, so I was all over the place. I had a lot of energy. I could do many things at the same time. And then I studied at Human Movement Sciences. I think it's called sports science in the States.
Yep.
And then I
Exercise
want,
physiology.
yeah, exactly. Then I wanted to do my PhD, and I went to Amsterdam to the Free University, where, by the way, has been a lot of police research by Roel Audians, Peter Renden, and so on and so on. A lot of
Oh
PhDs
yeah.
in police science. But I was not ready for my PhD because it was, I wanted to work with people. So I have one peer-reviewed article about how strange is it about the role of religion in coping with elderly who are sick. So now but
Yeah.
okay. Anyway,
Makes sense to me now.
you make now make this with me, yeah. But I couldn't, I wanted to just work with people, and then I became a teacher at a what do you call it? In a institute where sport teachers were developed, were
Okay.
trained. I did that for 7, 8 years, and then a friend of mine who was at the SWAT teams at the police asked me, "You have both a background in education and in martial arts. Maybe you like to come to the police and become an instructor there." And so that's how it goes. So I went to the police here in Utrecht in the Netherlands. I had the opportunity at that time to also have a little bit street exposure. Now it's far more regulated and so on and so on. But in my time, it's actually it's very strange nowadays when you talk. But we just went with all our stuff on the streets and took part in the arrest and control and everything. And but it was maybe not that good. Also from insurance,
But it was probably fun though. Uh,
it was true. Yeah.
yeah,
And then I
what's the use of having all these skills if you don't get a chance to test them and
Yeah,
and test your
especially,
metal out on the
yeah,
street, and demonstrate
yeah.
the validity of them.
And we had a great course at the time. Here in the Netherlands, it's called integral professional training. So a you become a teacher in law enforcement training, not only at the academy, but also for regular police. And
Okay.
you're responsible for all parts of the training. So the defensive tactics, the firearms, what do you have now? The procedures, the tacticals, everything, law, and so on. It was at that time it was 1 year and a half, maybe even 2 years. So we were at the police academy in Ossendrecht, internship was it? Well, it was so great. And then I went to the police department here in the middle of the Netherlands. It was for regular officers, so it was not the recruits, but for regular officers. And maybe because I was so enthusiastic, and I think I had a little bit strange. I had a background from the streets, so I was a little bit streetwise. I had the educational part from studying at university. I had the educational part, so it opened doors for me that normally I think would not open. So I had the opportunity to train the SWAT team of the middle of the Netherlands here, but also not sure how you call it, we have teams who do intelligence or
Okay.
speaking to sources.
Yep.
It's a little bit like the undercover part.
Yeah.
And I had
Yep.
the opportunity to to do everything. Yeah, it was great. But at the same time, I was also young. I was in my mid-30s. I was strong. I was fit. I was doing all that kind of martial arts. And nowadays, when I'm talking with colleagues from the time, I think, oh, the poor officers, because like I just wanted them to train hard and be tough. And we did a lot of car evacuations, and then we had guys now our age, like 60 or even older, and they had to run all those drills with me, like moving into the car, out to the car, but okay, I was
Well,
young.
yeah, and it's funny you
I,
should
I
mention
I
that.
would do a better job right now, I think.
Yeah, because now you have new perspective, and
Yeah,
what a 50-some-year-old body feels like compared to a 30-some-year-old body. A
exactly.
30-year old can't. And I I don't know the origin of this story, and maybe perhaps you do, but I think it's kind of like an someone explain again, someone I was just telling this to another colleague the other day, and I explained it, and he said that's a Buddhist zone, I think is the way he what the
Hmm,
word he used to pronounce it. But
great.
you have two men that are looking upon the mountain, and as the parable goes, uh, one turns to the other and says, "Isn't that mountain beautiful? I bet the view from up top is even better." And he's like, "Yeah, I bet it is." And so one man decides to go on the journey to climb the mountain, and he suffers all the trials and tribulations and the hardships to make it to the top of the mountain. And he finally makes it to the top of the mountain. He turns around, looks upon the valley from which he came, and he says, "Wow, look how beautiful that is." And he can't wait to get down to tell his friend. So he returns back down to the valley from where he came. He meets his friend and he says, "Friend, look, you know, um, I've climbed the mountain and I've looked back upon the valley, and yes, it is beautiful. The view is amazing from up there." And his friend says, "I know, I can see it from here." And so I tell that story a lot, especially to young supervisors, because
Yeah,
as you're progressing, through a career, you can look at someone and you can think you understand what their situation is like, but unless you've actually walked in their shoes, you really don't. You're making assumptions,
yeah,
and so yeah, that story just really jumped out at me when you said that. I I got into CrossFit in my late 30s. I've been doing it for 20 years. I've always been a very strong advocate for physical fitness and nutrition, and that's actually what kind of steered me into the wellness space and policing. This cop optimization, because I saw the data about how young police officers were dying, the rates of obesity, the cardiovascular disease, and now and later, like you say, as I was getting wiser and older, beginning to understand why this was having such a big impact on mental well-being, where the younger me couldn't have seen that. Like I always
no,
try to say, like, just work harder. Nobody
yeah,
cares. Work harder. Dial
yeah,
in. Get your sleep. Eat right. Exercise. Just keep pushing. Keep training. And it wasn't until I had time and perspective that I began to realize, like, okay, well, these things are all interconnected. They're all You can't
yes,
separate the mental from the physical, because
no,
it's one body, one mind, one spirit, one soul. So yeah, you have to feed them all. And if you don't, and if you get out of balance, it's not a matter of if you're going to have problems. It's really about when you're going to have them and how they're going to manifest themselves in your career. And that's kind of the journey I'm on now, is really, just trying to understand that better, certainly through conversations like this. I would love for you to share that paper that you wrote on spirituality. Like, I mean, if you,
it's in Dutch.
that's okay. I can use
Okay,
Google Translate,
yeah, 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 that's true. Yeah,
I can translate it, and
yeah,
maybe it won't translate, per se, from Dutch to English, but I'm sure I can get the gist of it.
but an intriguing question right now is for me is you have a lot of experience, a lot of years, a lot of wisdom. So have others. Um, but how can we use it for the better? Because yeah, how are we dealing with wise and older people in this domain or in other domains?
Well, as like my dad used to say, is youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah,
And and even when he told me that, I didn't understand it, right? Because
no,
I was, I w yeah, like, but I will say, right? Like, even it doesn't matter, even if you're in your 50s and if you're still doing the job, then you have to be prepared. Like, because a 20-year-old street criminal doesn't care that you're 50 or 60. Um, if he wants to fight you, he's going to fight you. So you better be prepared to win, whether it's through old man strength and wisdom, and, because you don't get to be old in this profession, by luck most of the time, right? There's a reason why there's, that there, what's that saying about be wary of the old warrior? Um, because he's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
But
so I
how
would
can
say cut yourself
how
some
can we,
grace.
yeah,
Yeah.
but how we is it possible to transmit this knowledge? No, maybe it's better to wisdom. Can we transmit it to the youngsters?
Yeah. Is there any way to accelerate that learning process, right? To get them to open up to
Yes.
accept the wisdom of others? That's a great question. That's probably the $1 million question, right? The $1 billion question in this day and age. I think we're getting closer to being able to do that, but um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you force someone to be ready, because sometimes some lessons just have to be lived and learned. Honestly, I don't like the expression lived experience. Maybe it's just my own ego that's getting in the way of that expression. Um, because well, and probably because sometimes I think people just use it as an excuse,
Mhm.
and they use it as a reason not to learn and grow. They can say, well, these are my lived experiences, and you have to accept me for who I am, without any give and take, without any acknowledgement that that also requires give and take. Like that's how everything works. Like you can't always take and expect others to adapt to you because the world doesn't work that way.
No.
And I think when you put up a barrier like that, I think it's a subtle psychological cue. And again, this is just me. And I know, in this world of righteous indignation right now, sometimes, someone will choose to be offended by me having my own opinion. But, um, I guess maybe that's kind of a danger too right now is, um, yeah, I mean, what's the other saying, right? First seek to understand and then to be understood.
Yeah.
And that's like, I think we've got it backwards now. It's like even this younger generation, which was raised by us, by the way,
Yeah.
they want to be understood before they know how to understand. And I don't
But
know.
what
Do you have any ideas? I mean, that podcast sharing of knowledge, this flattening of the spread of information, I think is one way. I
yeah.
do think this virtual and augmented reality world that's getting ready to, be unleashed on the world, through different types of AI. I do think there is opportunities to accelerate some of these learning curves, and advance these, the ability to capture these insights as you grow older.
Yeah. And are you do you know the Modern Elder Academy from Chip Conley?
I don't think so.
He wrote a great book, Wisdom at Work. Wisdom at Work is about that we have now a new generation of people of our age, the elder, who traditionally were very valuable in societies, and sometimes they are now not that relevant anymore. And he he teaches in that book how we can be of value, but his whole program is about what is the role of the elder in an organization? Because sometimes now we have three generations in one organization, and can we use that? And I struggle a little bit because there's also the saying, knowledge is transferred, wisdom is earned. So I'm not sure in how far we can transfer wisdom, but we can at least maybe as elder we can coach or youngsters. So for example, nowadays I work at the University of Applied Sciences at Physical Education Department. They become teachers themselves. So these are students from 18, 19, 20 years old. And especially information is ready available for them. But that's not my That's not my pure relevance, but my relevance, I think, is to be there for them, to ask some questions, to give some hope coming back to yours. Maybe that's what they need because they can figure out that you have kids yourself. They are fast, they can distill information, they are smart and so on. And by the way, even they don't want to listen always to you. That's that's being part of a youngster. But I can be there for them. I can listen to them. I can give them some hope and also some trust, like that it's okay. That they are okay, and that I'm having their back. That it springs to mind that kind of role.
Yeah,
What
that's
do you
gr
think? Yeah.
Oh no, I love it. And I want to ask, so I would want to do a couple things. I want to lead up to maybe just a quick thought exercise, but before that, you said something that was that I want to come back to. Three generations in one organization. I think historically that's been one of our strengths in policing, and particularly in the U.S. Maybe it's the same in the Netherlands and in Europe in general, but in the U.S., policing used to be this. It was a generational profession, particularly in your large metropolitan cities, like my grandfather in Scranton, Pennsylvania, was a police officer, and then one of my uncles was a police officer, and then two of his kids, my cousins, were police officers. But we have a large extended family, but that was kind of it was generational, and so you would have these, the wisdom passed along. There's good and bad to that,
Yeah.
but what's one of the problems that we have right now in the U.S. is we have this, people are calling it a recruitment and a retention crisis, meaning the number of people looking to come into this profession has dropped significantly. So applications are down, interest is just down overall. And then those that are in the profession are retiring sooner. So when
Mm.
people get to that retirement age, they're leaving. And then to top it all off, like the rate of attrition inside of the profession is higher than it's ever been. So
Ah,
people leaving, like after, like this used to be like a career, not a job,
yeah,
where, and a calling is what we call it. Like it could
yeah,
be, kind of a touch of that spirit in there, is that I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve others, and we've lost that to a great extent, in that now up to 20 to 30% attrition rate in the first 10 years of the job. So where we used to have three generations, we really have two right now. And the
mm,
largest one is less than 10 years on the job. So what happens when you lose all that knowledge, wisdom, and experience on the back end? And as a young officer, I would have never appreciated that. I just wouldn't have, because I knew everything. Like,
yeah, of course, yeah,
I got this shit. Like, I got it under control. Like,
yeah,
just, give me the keys to my squad and let me go to
yeah,
work. And I worked with a lot of people that were like that. You know, Fortunately, I worked in an environment where people were very strong character, high ethics, just good people, because our agency did a good job, I think, screening and hiring really good people. So, I mean, I feel very fortunate for my experiences as an early officer, because I had those generational leaders that taught me some pretty valuable lessons for a cocky, young, arrogant police officer. I wasn't even that young, even. Like, I can't even use that excuse because I was 27 when
yeah.
I started. Um, so, so that's a big problem right now in policing. And here, so I guess maybe here's the thought exercise. If you had the magic wand, or if you had the ability right now with your years and training and experience, like if you could go back, how would you build today's cop? Like what would the environment look like? Because and I'll kick it off by just saying, in the US, typically you're looking at, for a first year police officer, you're looking at across all 50 states, Some states require as little as like 360 hours of training to get your full certification, where for other agencies it's over 1,000 hours. Those are very few and far between. I think the average is probably somewhere around 600 hours. And compare and contrast that to like a licensed cosmologist, the person who cuts your hair and stuff. They have a training requirement of 1,500 hours.
Yeah.
And so, so the worst thing that happens there, you come out with a bad haircut, right? Like the worst thing that happens for, a police officer that makes a mistake is somebody dies, right? The officer himself, or they, have an interaction that goes sideways that, you know, I don't know. Like maybe you have some ideas, maybe you have some thoughts on this about how to train. I
Yeah,
have
but
some ideas, but I'd rather hear them
yeah.
from you first, see where you're heading.
Well, at the first place, I think, yeah, sorry, so many thoughts come ahead. But mostly when we talk about training, we talk about, for example, motor learning, skill acquisition, tactics, and so on. And I wrote a whole book about it. It's called Frontline Training. But I think I can do it even better. Was also with Bill Lewinsky wrote a chapter. Jeff Keul wrote the chapter, but it's in Dutch. But it's more. This was more about technique, tactics, and so on. But I think there are more important topics, like we talk about it this whole time, about building, yeah, um, developing, developing good human beings wearing the uniform. I think it requires. I would love to see. I would love to see a department where you have the Bill Lewinskys, the Ken Murrays, Terry Wollard, like sitting at a table with
Oh my gosh, yeah.
the generation before that being maybe these people are like the elder, they are sitting there, they are giving advice, they're doing some coaching. Then you have the chiefs and the operational guys from in the 40s, in the 50s, and then you have the younger generation. So use all the generation, build a family, but build a family open to society, not a family of like an in crowd versus the rest of society. And then from my point of view, I think I love the wisdom of Gert Bista. He's a philosopher of education, and he heavily influences my work in education. And he says that now, sorry, my English is not that good, so maybe you have to correct me then. But he says education is about three things. It's about qualification, about socialization, and about subjectification. And qualification means to get ready for the job. So it's all those things like your skills, your knowledge, your decision making, situation awareness, and on and on and on and on. Then
Yep.
there's the socialization, which is a part of how do we work at a police department? What are our values? What are our ways of doing it? But it's also about how do we work together, and not only with our teammates, but also with the public. And then the last part is subjectification. And this is a difficult concept, but what he means, what Bista means, is that subjectification means to answer the question, how would you like to be as a human being? So it's about how do you want to live your life? What are your values, and how
Yeah.
how do your values fit in with, for example, the values of your department? And are they, like, is there any tension or not? And can you handle it? And the subjectification part is important because the qualification and socialization is a kind of top down, like this is how we do it and we get our training. And the subjectification means that we also learn to think by ourselves and to take care of ourselves. So that would be sitting all the Terry Wallets and Ken Murrays and Bill Lewinsky's, and you can name it, at a table to go for some advice. And then the chiefs, or maybe our generation, still feeling young. Oh, sorry, the older guys are still feeling young. but to feel a part of a family, but an open family. That's important because family can also be toxic, eh?
Oh,
And
yeah,
then
absolutely.
and then to feel that, because that so worries me, that if you only talk about qualification, you only do the skills and you do the drills and you do the firearms and the tactics and so on. That's good, but the other part, the subjectification part, who do you want to be? That's a spiritual part. It is who am I as a human being in a uniform? What are my values, and are they still in line with the department? And how do I deal with the tension if I have to do things which have a tension with my how do you call it? My personal values.
Yes.
So, and to keep that all those things in balance, that would be a great police academy, I think. And to keep the higher calling, you said it yourself, to keep the higher calling fresh and on the table by the elder, maybe.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to touch on there. And first and foremost, your English is spectacular because you explain that incredibly well.
Thank you.
Um, the in the first part, right? So the qualifications, we would think of your technical and your tactical competencies. And I
Yes.
think the biggest mistake that we've made in the last 20 years is really focusing there. That, we make this assumption that if somebody is competent, then they'll be successful. But the problem is, and that's true to an extent, right? Because you can't be successful without those skills. So
Of
you have to
course.
have them, but they're not the only skills that matter. So there's a big debate that's going on in the States right now about which model is the quote best model. And I think that's where we make our first mistake, is that we always assume that we have to break everything that we have and start over again rather than just making adjustments where we are. So we have, like, and maybe you're familiar with these arguments. Do we have these regimented militaristic style academies where we yell and scream and, create this very disciplined environment? Is that the best approach? You have a camp that says, no, no, we should be taking more of a self-directed approach, and where the academy is more like a college experience or a learning experience where we teach people in that environment, but also make them feel comfortable. And here's, like, I think both can be very successful, and I've experienced both. I was in the military. I went through basic training, uh, a very regimented technical school, and then I was also in the and again, my experience then going through a law enforcement academy, where, like, that was a similar experience that brought a lot of structure with it, but it wasn't anywhere near the extreme the military provided. But some people struggled with it being in that environment, and but some people really blossomed and excelled. So, like, I'll use you as an example. So take your 16-year-old self who grew up on the street in a very unstructured with a very unstructured life where you had to figure things out. And then it was the bringing the structure in that allowed you to blossom. It gave you a sense of order and cohesion. And, this word coherence, begins to surface. Like, I understand, where I've come from. I know where I am today, and I have the capabilities to be able to see where I want to go in the future. And, like, when there's no coherence there, you can really get stuck in, what I call it a doom loop, like, where, hey, like, I don't feel like I'm making any progress. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the right answer. Should the states adopt this college style environment? And we've tried that, and we've argued about this for the last 20 years. Who makes the best cop? Is it a military veteran? Is it a college graduate? Is it neither? And I think while overall we can maybe try to look at numbers and answer that question, but I don't think that's the numbers will ever answer the question, because I think, and my personal opinion has always been, as someone who is a college graduate who's been through the military, but also worked a lot, when I was younger that I think it could be any or all of the above. And you have to, find that person really has to find where they are on the path. But maybe these academies just need to be instead of a one size fits all, we have to adjust to where people are today. And then I guess to, before I go on a really long tangent, to agree and, I agree with you wholeheartedly on those three categories because the most important, and I'm a big data person. I love data. I'm a fan of precision policing, of value-driven policing. Like everything that we do should have intent, should have purpose. We should have goals in mind about what we're doing. Um, and we should provide all of our police officers with the equipment that's needed, the training that's needed, the education if they don't have it. We have to provide all of these things, and we got to give them the right tools, the right weapon systems, and like the right defensive tactics training. But all of that stuff, right? We can spend a lot of money equipping an officer, but if the 6 inches between their ears aren't right, like to go back to your final and third point, then nothing else matters. It,
Yeah.
it's it's they may have some success in a career, but they're probably gonna break a lot of shit along the way. Whether it's internally, whether it's what's themselves, whether it's in their community, because they don't have that overall drive and purpose for serving a higher power and a higher good. Yeah,
There,
this
there,
man, we've
there,
opened up a big can here. I don't.
there is an interesting paper written by Craig Bennell, and I think Craig Bennell did it. I had him on the podcast also. He talked about the knowledge, skill, and abilities for police officers. And they did a narrative review. What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities police officers should be educated in? And what was fascinating was that after they did a review, so they looked in the literature, what is like, for example, de-escalation skills or self-regulation skills. And then they looked in the literature, is there any evidence for good programs and so on and so on. But then they asked subject matter experts, did we miss something? And the subject matter experts came with one category, and it was called um, um, being aware what it means to be a cop in a democratic society. So what it means is that besides all those other qualifications and tactics and techniques and strategies, a big part in education should also be, what is my role as a cop in a democratic society? Well, we talk about now about US and Western Europe, eh?
Yeah,
And and
absolutely.
and I think that's an important question. But the difficulty always is, even if you agree on a topic like this, say we find it important, then there is still the educational process, because sometimes at the police academy, these are youngsters of 20, 21, 22. It's the same in the military. There is good research. Like, for example, there is something called moral injury, where you
Yes.
as you know the concept, huh? And here in the Netherlands, Tine Molendijk did a PhD on it. So you're a soldier, you go to a foreign country and you make some decisions, and then you feel the decisions you made are according to the rules of engagement, but not according with the rule of your soul. And you get moral injury, which is like PTSD. It's a serious condition.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
so the obvious solution would be to educate people in front. If you go to a foreign country, take care, but sometimes you have to make decisions, and this. But there is some research from Neil Greenberg. He's a psychiatrist from the Royal Navy from the UK, and he developed some great programs. But you can also what's the word? Sensitize? Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also,
Desensitize and sensitize. Yes.
yeah.
Like,
So if you talk in front about what can happen, you can also sensitize youngsters. So that's such a So
It's
even if
similar
you,
to, yeah, that's similar to Dave Grossman's concept of stress inoculation,
yeah,
right? Like if you don't understand the stressors that are coming, like you're bound to react the way that you think that you're supposed to react. And so when you have that disconnect between what your own personal values are and between what someone else is demanding or expecting of you, or even quite frankly, what others ask of you, and
mhm,
then because you don't have the clear communication about what the expectations are, then they ultimately then hold you accountable for things they wanted you to do that then,
yeah,
conflict with with those values. Yeah, and I wish I would have learned, I wish I would have known, I can't go back, right? And so this is again the wisdom part. I wish I would have known at a greater depth this concept of moral injury when I was a younger police officer. I think quite frankly, it's one of the reasons why we have such high rates of suicide in policing
mhm,
today. If you like, there's too many people that don't understand what what police are trained to do, what the expectations are. They look at outcomes only and not processes, and then they blame the officer. You're right, the fundamental attribution error. They blame the officer themselves for the outcome when they should be looking at the system as a whole to say, well, why are we getting these outcomes? And this is what's really frustrating to me because this goes back to how I think we should train in the future, where I think and I've talked about this for over a decade, even longer now, probably close to 15 years. But when I first started talking about things like this, people looked at me like I was cross-eyed. But you have to expand. Like, let's just say you have to understand how many people you need inside of your police department. So let's just say, 200 employees at your agency. That's what it takes to staff and operate your police department. My proposal would be is, taking a similar model today is now let's add 33% to that. Because what we're going to do is we're going to build an entire additional rotation into our workforce. Because the way like a special operations model works, I know it's a little bit different for all of them, but let's just say in general, if they're going to go on a 4-month deployment, well, they'll spend 3 months training up for that deployment. They'll have no responsibilities except but to train. And then they go on their deployment. And then when they return from their deployment, they get rest time, forced rest. Like you're going to spend a few weeks decompressing, no real official duties. But then we're going to go immediately right into a training cycle. And in that training cycle, we're going to build on what we learned from our last deployment. And then we're going to build that into what we need to do next. Police departments right now don't matter. They've gone the complete opposite direction in the US in that we have these high expectations for what we demand of their performance, but we're going to defund them
mhm,
and expect their performance to improve. And then through this defunding process, what we're actually doing is pulling away from the resources for the capabilities to do it. So what does that create? Forced overtime, fewer people. The demand for police services have not dropped. They've actually increased, but our resources to be able to manage the demand are diminished. And so that puts additional pressure on those police administrators that are trying to get the job done and for the officers on the street that need to go do the work. And so, we have to, it's clear as day to me. And I feel like I've been screaming from the mountaintop, and it's, I'm yelling into a void. And this is kind of where, it gets frustrating because a war kicks off in Ukraine, and nothing against them. We what if the U.S. thinks that this is the right policy to go and support them? Well, overnight, we're dropping over $100 billion to help fix this. But I look back to 2020 when, we had a questionable use of force that led to a poor outcome. And, you know, American cities, were literally burning over $2 billion worth of damage. And the answer wasn't to dump resources into the police to make sure that never happens again. It was to pull resources away. And we can find money to send elsewhere, but we can't find money to spend to develop our own professional response here, which, by the way, in the midst of all that, like going back to what you said, we can incorporate all those three real important categories and not just train the technical and tactical competencies, but also create that culture where service is the expectation, and here's why, and help connect people to here's where your service is doing good out in the community. And then that comes back to the self, where now we have a higher sense of personal coherence for how this
Yeah.
is all working. And that's
But
the
it's
end of my
also
long
it
tangent.
no, it's also great because you touched about another important topic. That is that I'm all in for mental skills training. I'm all in for using wearables, HRV, whatever we have, go and use them. Yeah, of course, but if the if the it's always on three layers minimal. It's on an organizational, team, and individual. And for example, I work in acute medicine a lot, and for example, there they have a system for communication. It's called crew resource management. And but what is important to know is that if your environment is messy, say the operation room is messy, your procedures are not good, your stuff is not on the right place, there is a lot of noise from whatever it is, then you can invest in communication skills till you are dead. But the problem is on the team level. And you mentioned it also, like we can use
Yeah.
mental skills training, but what if you don't have a decompressing time? And what if you're doing overwork? So, and most of the time I'm asked, can you give some lecture about tactical breathing, or whatever breathing, and I'm all in for it, but you cannot separate them. And there is even a paper.
If the house is burning down around you, it doesn't matter what your technical,
Yeah,
how good your breathing techniques are. You're still going to burn up in the fire.
exactly. And so that I encourage always to look, but it's not sexy. Most organizations don't want to do it. But it's also there is even some little research about, and now this was a really provocating title. It was the danger of mental skills training. I thought, whoa, that seems pretty serious. But the researcher, it was a woman, I think, she argued that if the problems are on team or organizational level, and you only give individual mental skills training and then say, see, so now they are resilient right now. What's the problem? We have given them that training. That's even it can work against you. But now you are more resilient, so you can do more work in a team or organization which is defunded, so to speak, as an example. Eh?
Yep.
So what I'm trying to say is that it's the same with qualification, socialization, subjectification. It's not, you cannot separate it. You have to look at what does the officer need here? Oh, he needs a little bit more qualification. Oh, what is here needed? Oh, she needs a little bit more a reflection on personal values or critical mind. And what is did needed? Oh, he needs a little bit more about how we work together, what our values are. That for me is teaching.
And it would be amazing to create the environment where that's the expectation, and then there's no
Yeah,
judgment from that because everybody has to experience it. It's one of the
yeah.
reasons right now, it's like, uh, in what they teach in SafeLeo and, the suicide awareness and prevention program in the US here is like smashing the stigma.
Mm.
In that, like that might be the most, that might be the biggest hurdle is that sometimes people won't ask for help because they don't feel supported. They're really concerned about how others are going to view them, about that judgment. And it could just be that, it's like, the age old concept, right? That everything that you want in your life is really just resting on the other side of fear. in that and that fear can be, manifest in a lot of different ways. But, getting there again, that comes back to your question, right? How do we instill that mindset into people? Like, how do we teach others to be a young Erik Hein, regardless of their life experiences, like to show them that there is a path forward to hope, and we can teach you this resilience, because I do believe that resilience can be taught. It doesn't just have to be learned or experienced. Uh, I don't know. Well, I know we're getting close to 90 minutes already, and I feel like I've got another 3 hours worth of questions for you. But
I like the saying, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
yeah,
And I think it makes sense as an educator to answer your question. I think we need the elder to sit at the table where they can drink a cup of coffee, when they can speak out their sorrows, they can speak out their joys, everything. And then we can give them trust and confidence. And we, of course, and we develop good training methods, but it's the whole package.
yeah. And I would
That's what.
say my only caveat to that would be it has to be the right elders, right? It has to
Yeah, of
be,
course.
because that can
Yeah,
go the opposite direction,
yeah,
for people that are, there are a lot of old and bitter souls out there,
yeah.
sadly. And, some of it is, a creation from self, and some is inflicted by others, and just really the
As
way
a
things are
therapist,
set
I
up.
as a therapist, I learned the saying, "Hurt people hurt people,"
Yes.
and that reminded it was for me also, how do you call it? It's very important to remember that I have also my fears, issues, and problems, and sometimes I project them on others, and I have to be aware of that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's definitely something that uh, it's very difficult to become aware of.
Yeah,
Like, and because I
yeah,
know I did it. I'm certain I did it, right? Not
yeah.
just in my own house, but at work, and and other places. But
But we need, in any case, of course, we need the right elders, but I think we need people with wisdom, and wisdom is earned. So it's not that you can easily transfer just here is my wisdom and good luck. It will work out. They have to work out themselves. But I think we need that. That's my conclusion from this conversation. Also, we need very wise people in leadership roles.
oh man, yeah, that's another can of worms. Like, the way that we teach leadership in American law enforcement, how our selection processes go for promotion, and um, yeah, generally, I don't want to go down this path, because we would definitely need a few more hours. Maybe we'll have to do part two. But that's one of the things that where I think we make a big mistake, is that we promote oftentimes because people are technically and tactically competent. They're good at what they do, so we assume that they're going to be good teachers, and
Yeah,
that can be a big mistake.
yeah.
Anyway, so I do, before we wrap it up. So you showed your book, Frontline Training. The last time we spoke, it was only in Dutch. Is it available yet in an English translation? Can I buy that here in the States yet?
I can send you a copy, but I'm not going to translate it in English because I think it's 2 years ago, and I have other ideas. I'm working on a book which with a working title, Emergency Brain, right
Oh,
now.
okay.
But there has to be some time in my life where I write a book. I did it a little bit in martial arts as a compass to talk more about the wisdom aspect and about the, yeah, that
All
kind
right.
of, yeah.
So, for people that are interested in your work and that want to learn more about what you're doing, is there like, or if they want to reach out to you, like what's the best way to get in touch with you, or how can do you have anything that you would want to any kind of closing thoughts on what you would want to share and
Yes, I would love to encourage them to go to my website. I think it's called trainthetrainer.org. I can send you a link. And
okay.
there are interviews with all the great people I mentioned, with Ken Murray, with Tony Blauer, with Bill Lewinsky, with Terry Wollard, with Jeff Quayle, like the work you are doing. And I love to. This is also a compliment for you. I think this is one thing we can do. We can share the wisdom of people with the public, and if they are interested, they and not to forget Brian Willens. I saw him on your podcast, and only his quotes are are how do you call it? Are
When,
gold.
yeah, yeah, he's so good. I like, um, yeah, I have ton of respect, and I've learned a lot from him. And yeah,
What I
yeah, and he's
like,
he, he's in Canada right now, and like
great, but
everything's in chaos right now. It's like we were
but
talking about before we went on air.
yeah,
Right now with Trump's wrecking ball and some of these. It's kind of funny how some of these. I mean, I'm trying to find a way to laugh about it. I mean, I know it's serious stuff, but I do think we got to give it a little bit of time and let things settle. But I've had several of our partners from Canada on. I mean, just in like, I mean, policing is a universal. There are
yeah,
universal truths to policing. That's why, yeah, I think it's fascinating for us to share our experiences and like what's happening in Europe, how you train, how you prepare, what policing is like, and yeah, here in the States and Canada and others.
yeah.
So that's
And maybe for
fun.
trainers, we can end with the quote from Brian. I think it's on your podcast also. I think it's a little bit like this. What's the smallest change you can make that would make the biggest difference? And that's a great quote for all trainers and educators, that they don't get overwhelmed by changing the whole system, but making small improvement every day. It's actionable.
Yeah, that very actionable, and it makes it manageable, and
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
doesn't overwhelm you. And it, yeah, actually, I talk in a similar expression. I have a program. It's called insulin resistance in the first responder. We used to call it the
Mm.
blood doesn't lie, but it's where we do a lab test and we test for insulin resistance and
Oh, great.
inflammatory markers in the blood because to me, like it's one thing that provides actionable data, and that's one of the reasons why 80% of police officers are overweight, 40% are obese, 20% are morbidly obese. We're dying at rates uh, of cardiovascular disease, well above the national average. It's because of a lot of these things that we're talking about, this disconnect from our spirit and our physical
Yeah.
self, and we're not de-stressing well. We're not trained well to understand how that's all impacting the body, and it's like sometimes people don't start because they think the problem is too big, and it's really just find one thing that you can do, even if it's just
Yeah.
take a walk for 15 minutes if you haven't been exercising. It seems small, but it's you just got to get the flywheel moving, get a little bit of momentum. So
And
I
it
think
and
that's
it
awesome.
also, yes, awesome. And it also, I think it's bi-directional, because if you're in line with your soul and your spirit, you would like to make those 15 minutes walks. You would like to have good nutrition. If your purpose is clear, your soul is clean. So it seems to me going both ways.
Great point. Yeah, I mean that goes back to hope, right?
Yeah.
And coherence and having a clear understanding about where you're going.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric, let's wrap it up.
Yes.
This has been awesome. I just really appreciate your time and your willingness to share your wisdom. It's I've taken several notes. I have a lot to think about. And then any resources that you want me to share with the audience, just shoot them over to me. We'll put it in the show notes
Yeah.
when the show goes live. And
Great.
thank you,
Was
thank you. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you also.
All right. Well, our 10 code here for going off duty end of day is 10:42. So until our next episode, I appreciate Erik's time and his willingness to share. And yeah, we'll be 10:42.